All right, so welcome to the Sergio Sarkis podcast, and it is a pleasure for me to introduce you, Mark Chestors. We're going to be talking about relationship with the body today, and he himself, and I'll hand it over to you. You're much better at talking about yourself than me, but I've known you for, I don't know, 15 years. You're a personal trainer and a life coach to many clients over the years. You have a background in, you went to Brazil to do healing. You have MMA fighting and Muay Thai training. You know, you've been, and interject at any point. You've been to Tibet and spent time with the monks there. So it seems that you're very much, at the one hand, very much in the body, to the point of, like, you know, that survival fighting fit, right? And then the more esoteric and the more energetic when it comes to the Tibetans and the Brazilian healers. And that's quite a big spectrum. And that's why I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about the relationship with the body. So I hand it over to you. Anything you want to add, and then let's get cracking.
The last thing I did was with Wim Hof, which was the ice training.
Okay.
So that really solved the missing link for me in that. But just to quickly, what used to frustrate me was I was very Western taught, so food, nutrition, movement. But a lot of my clients, I would say 80% were women, and they were housewives with kids and that, and they would have a lot of pain. And I knew that the Western methodology couldn't solve it, and I became extremely frustrated. So I had to look for other avenues, and that's how I went towards more mental side, emotional side, looking at those perspectives, and then bringing it back and putting it together.
So for the audience, let's go into a little bit more detail with what is the Western, more traditional approach to personal training and body. And then later on, let's go into the more Eastern and alternative.
In the Western way, it's very much about nutrition, and it's about movement, exercise. In the West now, it's coming with the importance of meditation, having space. But I feel there is still a massive lack of true understanding. I call it almost like analytical spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
So it sounds amazing, but it's not embodied. And that what I mean is information only becomes wisdom once you take the information and you live it day by day. So it's a way of life. And unfortunately, and I was the same. So I just sit back but I was the same. You come back and you get this information and you want to preach it to everybody. But at the end of the day, unless you're living it, no one's going to listen to you. Mm-hmm. So I've tried talk less and just, through my actions, that's how sort of my clients, I gel with them. Mm-hmm. And of course, the stuff I do, it works. So otherwise, they wouldn't stay with me. So that's something.
So in essence, it's all about embodying energetic, embodying spirituality, embodying intention. It's all about embodying what you're choosing to become. I'm putting my own spin on it a little. So
for me, one of the major things that comes with it is presence, actually. Because when you're present, you're actually focused on what you're doing. So if you're walking, moving, even taking a shower, brushing your teeth, you're actually present in your body. So you're present in your cells, and the cells have information. The cells actually have intelligence. But the biggest challenge I have, say, with clients is we're living in a sort of mental plane where we think there's no space between our thought process, and we're thinking all the time. And so we're not actually in our bodies. We're actually in psychological perception of our experience. And for people to understand that, it's quite challenging if you think all the time. So this is my challenge, is to create space through movement and breath work. In that space, allow people to see what's going on.
So you use movement and breath work, tapping into the East and the Western traditions to help people embody presence. And when they embody presence, they get to focus 100% on what they're doing. And then I imagine problem solve whatever's you know, problem solve whatever needs to be solved and enjoy life and enjoy relationships and everything else.
Yeah. Well, when someone's present and another person's present, so you don't have this thought, there's no projection of thought, and there's no stories. Something magical happens, actually.
Yeah, it's a clean connection.
Yeah, and in that, whatever needs to come to be maybe looked at or discussed or not will come. But that's taken me many years to trust that process, because.
So let's break it down. Let's go back to the beginning. You talked about the Western approach being nutrition and movement. Can we speak a little bit about nutrition, a little bit about movement, and then go on to the Eastern approach? I imagine there's some movement and nutrition there as well. How do you break down what you do as tools to get into the body and have a relationship with the body from an Eastern and a Western, basically?
The challenge with nutrition is the eating has become too analytical. So one of the challenges being in this as a trainer, and you're around trainers and health people, you're going on this course, that course, and you're learning all about food. And I got to a point where when I was eating, I wasn't enjoying the food. I was analyzing how many carbs I was putting in my body, how much protein there was, instead of just actually eating the food, chewing it and digesting it and having got it. That's a good meal. And this is really what I want. And so everybody is unique. Everyone's unique. And I feel we should feel more what we need to eat. So if I go somewhere and I want to eat something and I feel my body feels something, I always ask myself, in this moment, what do I feel is the healthiest option I can eat?
Right.
So if I feel like something sweet, is it a chocolate bar or maybe a banana or apple? If I walk into a
I see. So it's like a more instinctive and more intuitive and more somatic rather than analytical, and to look at nutrition from that point of view.
Definitely. But that obviously comes, and this was like another thing for me, embodiment, is that when you're connected to yourselves, you're starting to feel your way through life, not think your way through life. So it's a very different, for me, my experience has completely changed.
And maybe give a couple of examples, if you can, without mentioning names, or examples of the benefits of moving from a thinking-based nutrition to a feeling-based nutrition, and then also
I eat a lot less.
Interesting.
So I only eat 2 meals a day, and I work out. I mean, I work out a lot, but I eat 2 meals a day. That's enough for me. But I just make sure that those 2 meals are I've got everything in them. So I've got my veg, I've got my proteins, I've got my carbs. So for me, I ate less, and I really enjoy what I eat, because I'm actually I'm hungry, so I want to eat.
So amazing. Now let's look at the movement. And I know you train people in a different way when it comes to movement. A little bit from my experience is that rather than following a set of instructions, it's more about asking the body how the body wants to move, and remind itself of the pleasure of movement, almost in a creative, childlike way. How would my body like to move today? So I wanted to let you go. I'll throw that to you. And
I don't want to get too technical, but there's 6 basic movement patterns where you've got a squat pattern, you've got a hinge or a deadlift, you've got a lunge, you've got a push, pull, you've got rotation. And this is how the way the body moves. But within that, we move in 3 directions, which is forward or backwards, sideways, or a rotational one. So for me, if I can get people moving in all of these 3 planes with these main exercises, it really switches on the nervous system. And if you can switch on the nervous system when you're working out, that doesn't mean doing heavy stuff, but if you switch it on, you get really good results from that. And something happens mentally and emotionally for me, what I've seen with the people I work with.
Amazing.
Not try not to be too technical, but
it's nice to break it down a little bit into these 6 groups. And I would love to maybe at another point learn a bit more and break those 6 movements down. Maybe you have done already in your website or service or whatever, but understanding these 6 movements would be really worth breaking down. Definitely.
And in that, there's direction, and then you also can lie on your back, you can lie on your stomach, and there's a whole new parameter from that reality. So it's infinite how we move, and it's for me, it's about playfulness. Like really play again. Like people, when you fall in love with your body again, and instead of looking at it and judging it, and I'm overweight, I'm this, but you get to move again, presently, focused. It's for me, it's the best thing in the world. I love it.
I really feel that.
Yeah. So it's getting people back to that, to fall in love with themselves through their bodies again, through their cellular function. And when that happens, their lives really change on all levels, mental and emotional.
Have you trained anyone recently or in the past who has been in serious health crisis, and you've tried that, whether it's the nutrition approach or the movement approach that you're talking about, and have had amazing results? Have there been any stories?
Nutrition is super important, obviously. Nutrition, water intake is super important. But I have, yeah. So it's one of the main people I work with. He was going on to becoming a diabetic too. And he's got no excuse for it. He's 70 now, 71. So I wanted to blame Aid. I'm like, dude, you know what you need to do. So he committed, and within 8 months had negated every single negative effect on his body, and is now doing stuff that he's reversed his age by about 15, 20 years. He said I could speak about it. And then there's someone else that I've just started working with who has Parkinson's, and that was a shock for me. It's the first time I worked with someone, and I was like, okay, because it's a real debilitating challenge. And in about a month to say 5 weeks, he has improved about 500%.
Wow.
So the cognitive function between brain and muscle is now happening again. So for example, he would do 6 movements, and by the 6th one, forget what he's doing. Whereas now when he gets to 6 or 7, he starts to speed up the movement and finish it off more powerfully than when he started. So yeah, I'm playing with it. I'm going into different fields, but it's working. And
that obviously has an impact emotionally and mentally, and one's quality of life, right? It's not just about the synapse and the neurological improvement.
Well, he won't mind me speaking, but he's got 3 young children.
Yeah.
He's only 56.
Wow.
He runs a business, so it's
yeah.
You know what I mean? But the most important thing for me, if I meet someone, is they have to have something that outstrips everything, and that's desire. They want to get better. It's like they've cut all the bridges and they want to get better. Because if someone's desperately wants to get better, they'll listen and they'll do what you tell them to do, and they'll practice, because an hour a day isn't enough. You've got to embody this, what you're learning, moment by moment.
Wow, amazing.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, and I concur. The relationship with the body is the relationship with the mind. Having had a very difficult medical issue to have come out through the other side, that for me, the mind is not the brain, just the brain. The mind is actually the interconnectivity of every part of our neurological system. And the chakra system, which is, let's go to the Eastern side of things too. The chakra system actually is a very nice way of superimposing onto the Western system of movement, because you've got the subtle energetic aspect that works through the body. And for those of you who don't know, very, very quickly, you've got the crown, you've got the head, you've got the throat, the creativity, the heart. Then there's the solar plexus over here, the will, and then the sacral, which is the creativity, and then the root chakra, which keeps you grounded to the earth. So yeah, we can talk all about that. But the last thing I'll say before I hand over is that for me, the brain isn't the mind is not equal to the brain. The mind is the entire body. And so the more we have a relationship with the entire body, the greater our muscle to work out not just the body, but life, our ability to enjoy life, to suck the marrow out of life, to have great connections, to be better leaders, better relationships, the whole lens through which life becomes just so much more animated and joyful. Yeah.
Well, that's what I would say is joyful. And that's, I mean, we don't understand how it fully works. You can speak from your experiences, I can speak from mine, but I agree that the whole mechanism, the whole beingness would be the mind, in a way, where the cells have intelligence. You've got imagination, you've got left brain function, right brain function, you've got all these different things. And also, in my experience personally, I know myself hold information. So all the trauma I've been through, all the injuries, my conditioning from a child, my patterning, my cultural upbringing is held. And so when I look at somebody move, it gives me a really quick idea of what's going on with them.
So for the audience, let's give a couple of examples. Let's say, like raised shoulders or, whatever. Let me hand it over to you. What can you,
I would
recommend people paying attention to in their own body?
For me, the biggest challenge is trying to work with someone who's thinking about a meeting or thinking about the kids or thinking about what they're going to do. And so how do you stop somebody from thinking, with using their imagination to think about an event that hasn't happened yet, where they should be, they're not present. So one of the things I'll do, I'll give them a very, very difficult rotational exercise that if they don't focus, they'll fall over. Or I'll get them into something where they have to balance. So if they don't put all their attention to what they're doing, they'll fall. And if they fall, I know they're not with me. So I use these techniques to get them present. Breathing is so important, correct breathing techniques. So using breath with focus. And then also, as I said, you can move forward, backwards, sideways with rotation. In my personal experience, if people are really strong in certain patterns and really weak in other patterns, it gives me quite a clear way of how to work with them. If I can work with them, actually, because depending on the restriction or the allowing or the open-mindedness. So the body tells you everything you need to know. The mind, the stories we tell ourselves is 90% regurgitated. We have to keep repeating the story to almost be present, or not be present, but to align in this world with other. And when you can break that cycle, something happens where there's an awareness starts to wake up. And that's exhilarating.
So let's open up the field of breath work and your experience with Wim Hof, and then maybe with the Tibetan monks as well. I'm not sure if they did that as part of their meditation. And then how to use the breath to release some of the trauma in the cells and to take us out of that fight or flight and into that parasympathetic, calm, highly where one's genius can really be unleashed. Let's talk about that.
In a very broad way, Wim Hof, that was one of the most important things for me, because one, when you're in freezing water, you're in a state of stress. So how do I negate my environmental stress? So, and that was through breathing, through certain techniques. So because your body's going, I'm dying here, I need to get out. So how do you negate that? But the other thing that taught me the most was we'd be doing breath work, and as soon as we were told we're going into the freezing water, everyone's mood changed, and the stress of it's a challenge. It's one of the hardest things I've done. And I was amazed because it would take us 15, 20 minutes to get into shorts and have to walk to in the freezing cold, and how much energy I'd used up thinking, what was going to happen to me. And I was like, isn't that crazy that I've used up more energy thinking of what's coming than actually the event itself? And that's when the penny dropped for me. I was like, psychological stress, which is psychological thinking of an event that hasn't happened yet based on a past experience, creates a fight or flight response in our bodies. With fight or flight, our bodies don't function correctly. We can't digest. Our immune system is suppressed. Our thought process is suppressed. the blood goes to the extremities to either run, fight, or cower, whatever it is. And I thought I was pretty calm. I was living in that state predominantly in my life, without even knowing about it. And that's when I was like, wow, okay, I've really got to get a handle on knowing when this state is happening in the city, especially, and negating it.
Yes.
So that was a huge learning for me personally. And that's why I try and teach people as well.
Interesting.
So psychological stress.
Did you combine it with anything in Tibet?
Tibet was all about, so the Tibetan monks, there's two sects. One is the analytical side of it, which is the 73 or 82,000 verses, which the Buddha wrote. But the other side is meditation. They would just focus on meditating, or the ones that taught me. And they weren't so interested in movement. They were interested about, can you hold your attention on something for an extended amount of time? So the way they taught me is they gave me a candle, and I had to look at the candle for 10 minutes in the morning, in the afternoon, and the evening. And could I hold that attention? And was I aware that if it wandered, I could bring it back? So you think 10 minutes isn't a long time, but give it a go. So you're training your mental focus to stay on one point of reference for an extended amount of time. As in our world is all about flittering and flapping, like social media, you go out into the city, there's cars. And once I'd learned that skill, could I bring it and do it in the city, which was challenging, I would say. That took me a long time.
That's absolutely fascinating. And the relationship between movement and stillness. I want to share with you a meditation that I'd practiced for a couple of years. It was one by the Isha Yoga. And it was very simply in the in-breath, I am not the body. In the out-breath, I'm not the mind.
Yeah.
In-breath, I'm not the body. Out-breath, I'm not the mind. And I would do that 5 minutes every day. And that went on to learning about, Eckhart Tolle and Muji and all the others, the Advaita Vedanta path to no mind. And no mind, being able to remain still, not identifying with thoughts, sensations, and feelings. That muscle of training oneself to stay present with the breath, with the movement of the breath, so it doesn't just stay in the head, but it's actually interacting with life. That was really, really important for me and for my clients, so that when shit hits the fan, emotionally, mentally, health, finance, relationships, there's this practice that can take us back into that center. And it really is about not being identified or being distracted by things that flutter thoughts, or being so glued into those feelings, or being so overwhelmed by the sensations, almost like addictively needing a hit, whether it's the app on a phone, or whether it's some sweets, or whether it's sex, or whether it's a film, that addictive need for stimulation.
Correct.
And if we can just sort of return into that stillness while we're moving, that's the essence, that's the art of being and becoming, isn't it?
That's the joy of life, I feel when we're present and we're taking inspired action, for me, that's the best expression of myself for me personally. And it does take dedication and practice, discipline. And then, like you said, after a while, it becomes the norm. And it's carried out into all day, into every day, So it's a magical way, and it's quite simple, actually.
So let's talk about how movement and stillness can impact our relationships with our partners. Initially this podcast was about relationship with the body, but I'd like to talk about how relationship with the body impacts relationship with our lovers, or even our families and friends and business colleagues. So let's make that jump. How has it impacted you working on the body and with your clients, the relationships in the lives of you?
There is, can I give a story?
Yeah, please.
I can give a little story. There is when we went, before we got to Tibet, we met a Tibetan monk who's a Rinpoche, which is a reincarnated Buddha. And we were, let's say, I think I was in Brazil at the time. We were all we weren't balanced. And I remember when he would come into the room, within about 10 minutes, everybody was smiling. And I was like, I sat back and I would look around me and everybody had these massive smiles. Everybody was happy. And for me, it was like, that's power, because I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing something. And when he would leave, sort of everybody would sort of go back to their dramas. And that took me 5 years to work out of working this out. And the best way to explain it is basically, I think it was the 1800s, there were these clockmakers in France, and someone told me the story, and every day they would leave, they'd worked on the clocks with the pendulums, and they would come back and all the pendulums would be synced together. And we're like, how is that possible? Because, we're working on them. So they're all at different times and at different speeds. They decided to stay there the one night. And slowly but surely throughout the night, they all came into sync. They were like, that's it. And then in the corner was this massive grandfather clock with the biggest pendulum. And it was swinging. And all the other clocks came into alignment with that. And then I realized the highest energy always wins. And the highest energy is presence and love. And if you're able to be present and aligned, put your thought process into your back pocket.
Yes, beautiful.
And just listen to somebody. I think it's the most important thing we can do as humans for one another.
It's almost by a living template, by vibrating at a frequency that is our optimum, or yeah. What does that mean, to vibrate at a frequency? I would say, for people who may not know what that means, so it's like everything has a certain pitch, has a certain wavelength, has a certain frequency. And the frequency of love it's as if, and I'll talk very personally, I see it's very hard to describe without it going personal. It feels like whatever is coming my way, I meet it with a smile. Whether it's a thought, a feeling, a sensation, because I'm not identified with them as who I am, the ability to relate to what's coming my way is my choice.
Right.
That's like the biggest realization that ever occurred to me. How I relate to what happens within me and without me is my choice. That doesn't mean I don't have boundaries, but if it's raining, how do I relate to that? If it's sunny, how do I relate to that? If I'm sad, how do I relate to that? If I feel joyful, how do I relate to that? So there's this, in the beginning, it's quite specific with like things and sensations and feelings, but afterwards, there's this smiling effect where, it's almost like a massage where you're stroking the present moment as it unfolds. It's the best way to describe it. In a way, it's like falling in love and making love energetically with what's happening. And then everything becomes a little bit magical, Here we go.
But you're saying like the power is, how do you choose to, I call it, do I react or respond to what's unfolding? If I react, it's a reaction, and I'm reenacting what I always do. And so for me, I get bored very quickly. If I'm responding, I've just taken a second, looked at it, and I've made a choice on how I choose to have this experience. This does not happen all the time because I can react. But once I react, I will, because I know my body when it reacts, and I will pull back, and I will always go and write to myself, why did I react to that moment? What must I believe that I felt some sort of stress about this experience? And slowly but surely, in my personal experience, as I've done that more and more, there's an ease, there's a response, there's a playfulness, even with the challenges. There's a playfulness to see, okay, this is interesting. So how can I gather the maximum amount of goods out of this experience? And it's like a game. For me, it's like a game.
I would, it's beautiful the way you described it, the respond and react. And then also where, you know, to be fallible, it's okay to react and then to learn from it. And I also want to add something to what I said, that sometimes boundaries are very, very important, particularly when we're protecting what is sacred. You know, if someone means us harm, then we can protect ourselves from that. If someone doesn't mean us well, we can put a boundary, you know? So yeah, that I just wanted to add that
Yeah,
to that too.
the whole boundaries are that's a whole topic on its own.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, for me, I'm quite fortunate. I got taught about boundaries at a young age, to have
Mm-hmm.
boundaries. But also there's something else that I would like to add. The being grown up in South Africa, quite physical. One of the things I would struggle with was being vulnerable, and that's probably one of the most powerful things I've learned as a man is vulnerability. Because if something bothers me, or I'm reacting or whatever, and I have people which I'm fortunate to have who I can share that with, who can hold space for me, and I let that out, it really frees me from repeating that again.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that vulnerability, as I let it out, it's not me. So I'm not attached to it, because there must be something more. So that, and holding space for others to do the same. When you have a group or network who are authentic around you, that you can do this with each other on an equal basis, it's another very powerful tool to just lighten your load, let go of things. So, but again, that's a huge topic, just boundaries.
Topic, yeah. And how the relationships have improved, I imagine. The more in touch you are with your body, the more conscious we are. And so,
but yeah, and holding space, as we're saying, if you hold space for someone, and from your heart's intent for them to be able to really express and be vulnerable with you, with non-judgment, the relationship can only get better. Because you're constantly moving, you're constantly like freeing yourself of years and years of rubbish, really, and everything is better. To me, the sex gets better, which is super important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, and to that point, intimacy is the greatest turn on, because when the trust is there, there's so much more room and eagerness and desire to play, to excite, to take ourselves to the next level. And intimacy the trust only happens when there's consciousness, when we're taking responsibility for how we're feeling, and then there's no games. So I have found that exactly to that point. Being willing to be vulnerable and owning it turns a weakness into a strength. And then that strength gives everybody permission. I'm saying everybody as in all the different kind of relationships we have, but let's say our partners, it gives them permission to also be vulnerable. And then there's nothing between us. There's no unspoken bitterness. And with that, naturally, there's a merger, right? Because there's nothing pulling it away. Most of the time, if we're unconscious in a relationship, part of us is bringing it together, and then there's another part which is repelling. And then you have this shitty, shitty maybe not right, but let's say limited connection.
There's an underlying little frustration that lies into that, because it's going to keep coming up. You know, whatever's not really solved will just keep showing itself in other areas of the relationship. And so that's one thing I've learned. If I don't solve things or align with things with my partner, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it will eventually break us up if we don't sort it out.
Yes.
So I've had to, so for me, it's like, well, I need to make this difference. And there's one more thing about embodiment within relationship. Ask yourself, if you're present and you're in your body and you're listening and you're aligned, there's space, and you really listen to your partner, there is something that you're going to learn actually about yourself and about them. But if you have a constant thought process and just waiting for them to finish with an answer for them, you're not there. And all you're doing is projecting what you've always done, and they're going to be doing the same. And then that is where there's a complete communication breakdown and nothing works. And I've been guilty of that for many of my relationships. But for me, that's also tiring after a while. So it's again, it's about taking ownership for your own life, for yourself, and how you are treating other.
Yes, exactly. All right, so I think that pretty much concludes the discussion today. Just want to leave it with a thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom, Mark, both in terms of the relationship with the body and also each other. You know, the challenges arise, and there are moments when we react, and that's okay, and that there's an opportunity each and every moment to relate to our bodies and the world the way we wish. And that's the thing that I really want to, that's the message I want to share. And thank you for educating me and all the audience with all your experience. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you very much. Much God bless everybody.
Thanks, man.
What's up to everybody.